Welcome, everyone. This is Rachna Shah, the Senate Clerk. I'd like to draw your attention to the slide on the screen. This represents the protocols we will follow during the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Rachna. It's now my pleasure to call this meeting to order. Our first item, as per typical practice, is a motion to approve a special rule limiting each speaker to 2 minutes each time they're recognized. A 2/3 majority of those present and voting is required to approve the special rule. Is there any discussion? Okay, host, please initiate the poll.
All right, we'll give about 10 more seconds if you wish to vote. And last call. There being 123 ayes, 1 nay, and 1 abstention, that motion prevails.
Thank you, everyone. The next item concerns administrative responses to University Senate actions and is presented for information. At this time, there are no responses pending. Item 4 is a list of faculty, staff, and student deaths that have been forwarded for announcement to the Senate. I invite you to observe a moment of silence while I read these names. Stephen Agard, James Anderson, Kenneth Buell, John Cogan, Lottie Hoder, Christoph Frankowski, Sandra Kelsey, John Kress, Deborah Krupp, Thomas Lundgren, Edmund Lundstrom, Ronald Marchese, David McDonald, Gary McVeigh, David O'Brien, Karen Paddock, Cynthia Pawlowski, Alice Ross, Daniel Schnellbrick, Virginia Sykes, David Wiesbrod, Wayne Welch, and from our students, Carson Jansen and Katrina Sponheim. Okay, the next item is the formal introductions to the Senate of 3 new deans, CEHD, Vet Med, and Dentistry. We will start with Dean Keith Mays from the School of Dentistry. Keith, if you would like to say a few words.
Good afternoon, everyone. Sorry, just unmuting there. Just great to be with you and to be able to be introduced. It's been a great run and a great honor to serve thus far. My previous role was academic dean and now dean. Just looking forward to continue to lead and to grow the School of Dentistry.
Thank you, Keith. Next, it's my pleasure to introduce the Dean of the College of Veterinary Medicine, Dean Laura Molgaard. Laura, would you like to say a few words?
Thank you. It's my pleasure to be here as well. I'm honored to have the opportunity to lead the College of Veterinary Medicine. I've been at the college since 1997, so I know many faculty from across the university, as well as having very strong ties to the faculty within the college, and look forward to all that lies ahead. Thank you.
Thanks, Laura. And last but certainly not least, as Dean of the College of Education and Human Development, Dean Michael Rodriguez. Michael.
Thank you, President Gable. Yeah, really happy to be introduced. I am a proud graduate of the Morris campus and also a graduate of the College of Education and the Humphrey School on the Twin Cities campus. So I'm happy to be an alumnus of the University of Minnesota. Also a previous student leader. I was co-chair of the University Student Senate when I was an undergrad and a previous faculty member of the Senate. So I have a big spot in my heart for University Senate and for shared governance, of course. We are doing a deep dive in CEHD. I've been here for 23 years and we continue to build community and belonging, both on campus and off campus, strengthening partnerships with tribal colleges, with schools across Minnesota, and really working hard to focus on developing our First Gen Institute to support First Gen students across the college and across the campus. So looking forward to working with all the leadership across the system, and I appreciate the opportunity. Thanks.
Thank you, and welcome and congratulations to all three of you. So our next item is approval of the minutes from the University Senate meeting on November 4th. Chris, if we could please initiate the poll.
We'll give about 10 more seconds if you wish to vote. And last call. There being 140 ayes, 0 nays, and 10 abstentions, that motion does prevail.
Thanks, everyone. All right, the next item is the president's report, so I'll just launch in. Good afternoon, everyone. So as we round out the last days and weeks of the fall semester, I want to express my gratitude for everything that everyone's doing, for our support of each other, for your work in shared governance and your advocacy. I know we say thank you every time, to the point where we may be diluting our own expression of appreciation, but that's because our appreciation continues and remains deeply. I think I've mentioned many times that my youngest is a college student. I'm watching, in addition to, of course, listening to and working with our own students, watching his own experience. He is an excellent source of insight for me on how complicated this is from that point of view. It makes me very proud and grateful for everything we're doing on our own campus and also across higher education. So in this spirit, we're very focused on safety, COVID-19 and otherwise across the system. We are not aware of there having been a single cluster or outbreak in a classroom on any of our campuses. This is a testament to our diligence, our vigilance, but also on our strategies like vaccinations and masking and how we've been working together to keep each other safe. Obviously, we see the emergence of the new variant. There is a lot of analysis happening. It's happening right now. Imagine we'll go into more detail on that during Q&A, so I'll sort of save, I won't presume, and I'll wait to hear from you on what you would like to know about where that's going in these very early days of our awareness. Our vaccination rates are some of the highest that we've seen in any setting, with nearly 99% of employees and 94% of students reporting a combined vaccination rate of nearly 96% system-wide. As you know, because we're in the middle of it right now, we've been pivoting in response to another graceful pivot. Thought I'd be putting that phrase away, but it remains front and center in response to President Biden's executive order, and as a way also to address and meet the advocacy of many members of our community. So with that, we've taken attestation to a requirement and shifted all graduate students, student workers system-wide, all of whom need to submit proof of vaccination by tomorrow, December 3rd. The latest numbers I've seen have about half of us having fully completed the proof requirement and about half not having started the process yet. So if you could let your colleagues know that the deadline is in fact tomorrow. Individuals may request a medical or religious exemption that triggers testing requirements for those that qualify. The goal here is to make the process, this specific process, as smooth and easy as possible, as clear as possible, and compliant, all with an eye towards how we do this in the context of safety and assuring that we are implementing the appropriate tools at our disposal in order to maintain a safe campus environment. In this vein, we have been doing validation and assurance testing of the student vaccination information in partnership with Internal Audit and OIT to make sure that that information does in fact reflect accurate vaccination. With testing, we've been working with state partners and reviewing our COVID-19 testing access across the 5 campuses and addressing gaps as they are identified and emerge. So on the Twin Cities campus, the M-Test program is managed by Boynton Health and located in Reckwell and has more time slots that's been expanded. Most of the time, same-day testing is available, and certainly by next day. And our positivity rate through M-Test, so this is Twin Cities, is at 3.2%, still well below the surrounding communities. And important to note that 3.2 is amongst people who are either exposed, for the most part, testing because they either are exposed or concerned that they were exposed or have symptoms. So we would expect that other types of surveillance testing would have an even lower positivity rate. So we're working very hard to keep that number low, and so far, so good. Now, moving forward, we are watching everything very closely. We have very high vaccination rates, very low positivity rates. There's nothing today that indicates we need to change our approach, either by loosening requirements or adding new requirements. But this is day by day right now, and we will know more soon, particularly about Omicron and the fact that there are now cases in Minnesota, not surprisingly, as these things go. Moving on to the strategic plan, Impact 2025, I want to share with you that at the board meeting in a couple of weeks on December 16th and 17th, we will be reporting out to the board for the first time the first set of deadlined targets under the way in which we're measuring progress under the strategic plan. So there are too many people to thank for the work that goes into both the quality of initiatives and outcomes that are reflected in those results, and then also just the specifics of preparing it for presentation publicly. But it is a new strategic plan. We're at the first tranche of deadlines, which were December 2021. And for those of you who are interested, we'll go into detail during the board meeting, but we're pretty much on target with everything, even amidst all of the headwinds that we're all working through right now. So very grateful for that. Some of you may also track that in December every year, by law, we present an accountability report for approval to the board that then goes over to the legislature. And that actually comes up through mission fulfillment. And so we're working this year, because it's a first, on how to not just give the same report twice and how to have the accountability report start to line up with the reporting that we're doing under the strategic plan. So you'll see, for those of you who track that sort of thing, that working towards convergence, we're not quite there yet, and we don't want to risk an absence of transparency. So we're sort of over-reporting for now, and we'll get a little more streamlined as these processes develop a rhythm and a sequencing. You'll also hear a report at the board meeting on the annual research report and technology commercialization outcomes. That is also during mission fulfillment, and a discussion on how we are encouraging multidisciplinary and disciplinarity, in teaching and research. In the finance and operations portion of the presentation, you'll see coverage of the Twin Cities Master Plan, campus dining, capital and debt financial strategies, enterprise risk, and different budget variables and levers. Some of those are annual reports given every year. Some are specific to what's happening right now. And if you have any questions on that, I'm happy to answer them during Q&A. In governance and policy, there will be a discussion on the proposed revisions to the Board of Regents naming policy, which I will be discussing with you separately in an agenda item a few steps up from where we are right now. And then in full board, FCC Chair Ned Patterson will give his FCC report. We will give an update on peak, and the new Chief Auditor, Quinn Galswick, will be formally presented to the board. As we move forward this winter into some of the questions that are emerging and are related to the strategic plan but aren't as far along, I want to give you some updates on work in progress. Most notably, we have asked VPs Ken Horseman, Calvin Phillips, from Student Affairs, Julie Tonneson from Budget, and Mike Bertelson from Facilities to review the levels of hourly wage of student workers across the university system. They're looking by campus, unit, type of work, source of funding, and developing an analysis completed by January with recommendations to the leadership team so that we can consider options and consult with student leaders and utilize all of the components of shared governance and thinking about student wages and what we might do to move those along, both for the purpose of supporting our students and for the purpose of being competitive. Those two intersect nicely in this space, as sometimes they do. We anticipate the implementation of an alternate wage strategy from the central point of view for fiscal year 23, knowing that in the meantime, some jobs and some units are embarking on their own journeys. But finally, I want to recognize that today is Director of the University Senate Office and Awards and Honors Program, Vicki Courtney's last University Senate meeting. Vicki's wisdom and counsel, gosh, we will all miss her. I know I certainly will. And I will miss her talent. I will miss her institutional knowledge. I will miss her savvy. I will miss her sense of humor, and I will miss her commitment to shared governance. She has been in service to this critically important mission, which I know many of you have heard me say I've never seen or participated in shared governance that's run better, that works better or more effectively than it does here. In honor of Vicki's service to shared governance at the university and in partnership and consultation with Ned Patterson as FCC/SCC chair, we are naming the existing Shared Governance Award the Vicki R. Courtney Award for Outstanding Service to University Senate Governance, and adding a $1,000 stipend for recipients to this award. We'll be expanding the eligibility of this Senate Governance Award to include students, faculty, and staff involved in governance, and the Senate office is working on developing the new criteria. So Vicki originally created this award in 2014 to recognize those who've made a significant impact on University Senate governance with multiple years of service as a chair or member of a Senate committee. And now we're very pleased to have this award bear her name. So Vicki, I know I speak for everybody in thanking you for your 41 years of service to the university, and we wish you the best in your retirement and beyond. So with that, I'm going to conclude my report and take questions. There weren't any pre-submitted questions, so I'm happy to take questions from the floor. So you could raise your hands and we'll work on recognizing you.
Looks like the first question is coming from Scott Petty.
Yes, Scott. Please introduce yourself as you ask your question.
My name is Scott Petty. I'm the graduate senator from CFANS. Can everyone hear me? I had, anyway, President Gable, so year before last, the first day of classes, you met with all the student senators from Twin Cities. And Kriti Agarwal, who was the graduate student body president, asked you about the job search for the vice president. It was then the first round of the job search for the vice president for HR, and the fact that there were no students included in the search committee, and there was up to that point no student consultation as part of that job search. Last fall, when I was president of the graduate student body, I repeatedly asked you about the handling of the job search that hired Myron Franz as our senior vice president, which again included no student consultation. My understanding is that we've now hired an assistant chief operating officer named Janelle Broche, and we hired her in October. And again, there doesn't seem to have been any student consultation. I don't think any students served on her search committee. And last year, in the discussion of Myron Franz, MSA very clearly made the point that UMPD now reports up through the chief operating officer. And that therefore this was a position of, this was a part of the university that was of greater interest to students than it might have previously been. And in these two previous instances, when you've been asked about it, I felt like you told us that, this was an area where the university needed to do better, that this was not this was not a handling that you wanted to see develop into a pattern. I was wondering if you could now comment on the hiring of Janelle Broche as this is an assistant vice president position. She's apparently our assistant chief operating officer. I think I pay attention to things like this. I didn't even know that we were searching for this position until she was introduced to me. And in doing some checking, doesn't seem like there were any students involved in the search.
Is there a question, Scott?
Oh, sorry, I was having trouble unmuting myself. My question is just, can you comment on the hiring process? Like, is this a new position? The woman seems to have had a pre-existing professional relationship with Myron. Was this a choice to not have student consultation or hiring? I mean, was this a conscious decision, or were we just forgotten? I mean, who was involved in the hiring decision? Was faculty governance involved? I mean, I guess it's kind of the big, can you just comment on the hiring process?
Okay, so we have hired a lot of people in the last, since I've been president. I won't comment on searches prior to that time, and I recognize that you didn't either. The vast majority of those searches and have included students on the search committee. Some have included multiple students. Not every search has included students on the search committee. And in this particular case, she is the assistant to the chief operating officer, as opposed to having a supervisory responsibility, for example, over UMPD. She does not. But the details of that search, I did not hire her. So we are happy to prepare a response and get some details to you about that. But there is having a couple of searches that don't have students is not the pattern that I referred to in my remarks to you. The specific context in which I made those remarks, which I made publicly multiple times, was around Myron Franz's search, which we did not do a formal search for, and where I utilized existing policy that has been used before, including recently under President Kaler, where under exceptional circumstances, we hire without the traditional search process. That was the example of where I said there wouldn't be a pattern, and there has not been. He has been the one and only exception. Every other search that we've done for a senior level hire that reports to me or for which the office is responsible has included a robust, transparent public search. Next question, please.
The next person I have is Matthias Roth.
Yeah, Matthias Roth, faculty senator in CLA. I wanted to first say that I really appreciate that the university requests proof of vaccination, and I have a brief question about this. I have colleagues that have been vaccinated with Sputnik, a vaccine that has not been officially approved, and there's very little data out how it actually interconnects with Pfizer or Moderna. And I wonder how you handle these cases if my colleagues have applied for exceptions, but I wonder if there's a general kind of approach to this particular scenario.
Yes, so not everyone who has been vaccinated with the three that have received the different levels of FDA approval in the United States, but how we're handling each international vaccination or other vaccination, I'm going to defer to, I believe, Jill DeBoer to give us the specifics on that. So Jill, if I could phone a friend.
Sure. Thank you very much, President Gable. And I'm going to phone a friend because we are trying to really handle this on a case-by-case basis through the medical expertise that either the person has with their primary care provider or medical expertise at Boynton. So with medical director, Dr. Jennifer Kuzmarczyk and David Golden in the public health area at Boynton, they've put together a process where people can have those reviewed. So I will phone my friend, Dave Golden.
Dave?
Thanks, Jill. Thanks, President Gable. Yes, that's exactly what we're doing. So many of these are qualified as medical exemptions if they so choose, if it's not been approved by WHO or FDA, as well as they are offered the opportunity to be vaccinated as well. So both tracks are acceptable. I hope that answers your question.
Yes, thank you.
Other questions? Okay, thank you all very much. So next item is the Provost report. Provost Croson?
Thank you. I got unmuted there. So thank you, President Gable. Nice to see everybody. I hope everybody had a wonderful and relaxing Thanksgiving holiday. As President Gable mentioned, we are rolling out the vaccine mandate for employees. I'll note that one change is that this, as she noted, it includes undergraduate and graduate student employees. And so there's been quite a lot of conversation about how to implement that. I've been working with FCC and Faculty Senate on implementing the communications, helping to coordinate communications from deans to individuals who have perhaps not completed the requirement by Friday, and the path we're going to follow down that path. There's going to be a further discussion about that topic in Faculty Senate right after this. I've now also approved hiring plans for each of the colleges. So for units that are going to be hiring new tenure stream faculty, those have been, the plan itself has been requiring approval, and those I think have now all been done. So that's good news. People can move ahead with their plans. Over this last month, I had a great opportunity to attend a number of events, some in person. So we celebrated the Distinguished Teaching Awards awardees on November 15th, which was wonderful. And I got a chance to welcome the Office for Undergraduate Education Annual Assembly on November 30th. And it was also great to see so many of our staff who support our undergraduate students together in person. I also had the first in what I hope is a series of lunches with department chairs, heads, school directors. This is a community that I really had wanted to get to know when I came. We had plans to do this in March and April after I started. Of course, those didn't happen, but I greatly enjoyed the first one, and I'm really looking forward to a series of those over the next few months. And then finally, in November, we concluded our successful community fund drive, which I co-chaired with Dean Gary Jenkins. We raised over $1 million for individuals in need in our community, and we had 19% of our Twin Cities faculty and staff participating. So I want to thank you all for your generosity and for your participation. Finally, I'll just say you met 3 of our new deans today. In January, we're expecting to welcome 3 new leaders. The Dean of the College of Science and Engineering, Andrew Aline, the Dean of the Humphrey School, Nisha Botsway, and the Director of the Weizmann Art Museum, Alejandra Peña Gutierrez. And I look forward to introducing them to you this spring. So that concludes my report. I don't think there were
Are there any questions for the Provost?
There we go. No questions in advance, but I'm happy to take them now. Thank you.
Okay. Jerry?
Bill, let me show myself. Oh. The host won't let me show myself, so I guess I won't.
That's okay. We can hear you. There you go.
All right.
There you are.
So I rarely question the delegation of authority within the university, but there was a alert to me yesterday about a certain article about the dean of the school, of the Carleton School, and comments relative to COVID. And I've been in a position where I've had power delegated to me from as high as the President of the United States, and I always took that delegation of authority very seriously. If those comments, which are quoted in the Daily, are true, this is cannot be the opinion of the provost, I am sure. And that kind of delegation of authority, I think, needs to be strongly rebuked if there's assumed to be speaking for you, because those comments put my colleagues in on this campus at risk, at personal risk, and places families at risk. And so I don't want, I know that you can't speak on HR issues over the Senate. I realize that. But I would like you to address
30 seconds.
What's that?
30 seconds.
Oh, okay. I would just like you to address to us how you're interacting with your deans to make sure stupid ideas like this don't get expressed again. Thank you.
Thank you, Jerry. I appreciate the comment. Indeed, I'm familiar with the events. Dean Zahir and I have had a number of conversations about it, and I think that the response, which is appropriate and which I concurred with, was a very quick and immediate apology and a reiteration that she, like all of us, supports the university's work with flexibility initiatives and the process that we are following in order to determine what the appropriate modality of work is based on the job that individuals have.
Next on the list, I have Scott Petty.
Scott?
Sorry, I accidentally muted myself when the host unmuted me. Provost Croson, you talked about, as we're reopening from COVID and you're having gatherings with department chairs and being able to kind of implement your position as you had a desire to coming in. Can you talk in a little bit greater detail, number one, about how you're structuring this engagement with department chairs to kind of get below your monthly meetings with deans, but then also, you given any thought to holding regular office hours as had happened, under the previous regime pre-COVID, but then just kind of speak one about the mechanics of trying to have regular meetings with department chairs, how that's going to be organized. You could try to break them up into like parts of the university or have a cross section every time. And then just any other thoughts about kind of opening access to yourself more as we kind of come out of the perpetual pandemic lockdown.
Sure, thanks so much. So this first meeting was very much a pilot, just to kind of see what would happen. It was chairs and directors from across the university. I think there were 15, 20 people there. We were worried about all the normal physical distancing and masking and all of those kinds of things. But we're going to have a virtual one, I think, in a week or two, especially for cross-section people who didn't want to come in person. And we're going to be experimenting and seeing kind of what works and what the best way to develop that community. It's challenging to start a new job where you're not meeting with people in person, and so I was sort of looking forward to developing some relationships that I hadn't been able to do. I really like the idea of office hours. I hadn't much thought about whether or how to do those, but I'll certainly consider it, and we'll figure out what to do moving forward.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you, Rachel.
Thank you.
Next item is recognition of Vicki Courtney for her 41 years at the university. It's my pleasure to call on Ned Patterson for this item. Ned?
Thank you, President Gable. We want to truly honor Vicki for her 41 years at the university, 27 at the Senate, 11 as the named director of the Senate, but directing so many things for so long. And we could say so much. We could go on and on. I could bring up person after person, and that might be fun. But knowing Vicki, she's humble. She works a lot behind the scenes. Talking to Senate staff, we decided not to do that. We thought about it. So we wanted, Vicki, for you, try to keep this short but sweet. Some of what you do in your leadership is visible, like an iceberg, a good iceberg. There's so much behind the scenes. There's so much you do behind the scenes that are helpful. You are, to me, the epitome of a true servant leader, helping the university move forward. And you don't want too much recognition, but we need to give you a little bit here, or a fair amount. So to make it short but sweet as best we could, to get as many voices as possible, we asked the consultative committee leaders since 2010 for all 4 senates and the vice chairs of the Senate to send us up to 5 single words that they associate with Vicky. They could be words representing your personal, your professional, or your social personality. So any of those areas. And we decided to put that in a word cloud. So in a second, we'll show that slide with the numerous, I got very prompt and great response from all those leaders from the last 11 years. So I think hopefully this slide will speak for how much we so appreciate all your many great qualities and everything you've done for the university. Could you host, show the next slide, the word cloud of all these responses. You can see that thoughtful, dedicated, kind, thorough, strategic popped out as a little bigger and being more. I wanted some purple in there, thinking of Vicky, and then I'll give everybody a minute and Vicky to just look at the rest. You can see so many great qualities, and we'll miss you so much, as President Gable said, but we're really excited for you to go into your next stage and have retirement. I do want to look at the motto at the bottom. I don't honestly know where that came from, but be involved, be heard, make a difference is a Senate motto or a vision. And Vicky, you've helped so many be involved, be heard, make a difference. And you yourself have been so involved, made such a difference. And not everybody else realizes the rest of the iceberg behind the scenes. Vicky does so much to have people work together collaboratively and work together. And not everybody always sees that. And that is encompassed in all these words. So I just want to say one more thank you so much for the many years. You'll be so missed. We look forward, though, about hearing about your retirement and how that goes. And hopefully we'll see you around sometimes. And I think, Vicky, now you maybe want to say a few words.
Yes, thank you all so very, very much. You have no idea how much this means to me. Special thanks to all of the faculty, staff, and student leaders I have worked with, all of the senators I've worked with, all of the committee members. And we have over 1,000 people every year doing governance. And I think there's a lot of things that most people just don't know about how many people are involved and how many people contribute. And it has absolutely been my honor to be part of this. And I especially want to shout out President Gable. I also want to shout out Provost Prosen. I've had wonderful relationships with past presidents. There's not one administration that doesn't do their very best. And I don't think it's a very easy job from what I can tell. But I want to shout out that we have just a tremendous administration. And I just don't know if you all know how much that President Gable and Provost Prosen give to you each and every day and how much they think. So I want to shout out to them because I know, and their staff, and the award that you have named for me, I am just blown away by it. And I can't thank you enough. So I do so appreciate that. And in addition to thanking all of you as senators and committee members and governance leaders, I need to thank the team that I work with. One of the reasons I can retire happily is because I have a team that is beyond belief. I call them my dream team. I've been managing people for 4 decades. And this happens to be probably the best team I have ever had. And you will be well taken care of. And they are strategic, they are smart, and they won't skip a beat. And I also want to recognize Aaron Heath as the incoming director, who is going to be a wonderful addition as well. So just thank you all. And I know, Rachna, you're probably ready to call the 30-second motion. And we all know that I am a process geek, so I will conclude with that. So thank you all very much.
Thank you so much, Vicki. It's an absolute pleasure, and thank you for the kind words. And we will miss you terribly. So, and now, of course, welcome to Aaron Heath, who we look forward to working with into the future. The next item is the SCC report, and I'll again call on Professor Patterson for this report. Ned?
Thank you, President Gable. Since this is my third report, our third meeting this fall, I'm going to keep it brief, and actually many of the items we've worked on since the last meeting are in the agenda, so that we don't need to go into them. But I did want to go briefly a little bit more into the Regent's policy on namings, the proposed revisions. We did have an SCC meeting where we discussed this in detail with President Gable and others. With the SCC Senate Consultative Committee, there were also members of the Civil Service Consultative Committee, the P&A Consultative Committee, Equity, Access, and Diversity, the Social Concerns Committee, the Student Affairs, and the Student Senate Consultative Committee. So that's an agenda item coming up shortly, but there was a good hour-long discussion prior to the Senate meeting about that. We've also been working with the consultative committee leaders and the SCC and working together better, especially the process for senators or committees to bring a resolution forward and making sure all the senates that need to know about it are aware of it as soon as possible in a consistent way. So there's going to be some process changes there that will be for the better, and we're working all together in that. And basically, to keep it short, the rest are the next three items in the meeting, so I don't need to go over those because we'll be getting to them next, and that's the end of my report for SCC for today.
Okay, thank you, Ned. So as Ned referred to, the next item is our discussion for the changes to the namings policy. So this is a discussion for consultation on proposed revisions to a Board of Regents policy that is called namings, interestingly. And because this is a Board of Regents policy, a vote from the Senate is not required, but because it is an issue and a set of changes with which we know you have significant interest, we want to make sure that we are fully consultative on what we're working on and where it's going, both in terms of the chronology and also obviously in terms of the content. So as Ned enumerated, you all in various committees and also as a collective group have been tremendous with advice and feedback, questions, suggestions. There's no question that this policy is better and will serve our community better by virtue of the way in which you all have engaged. It's been for something so critically important and honestly very, very difficult, tremendous feedback and so helpful. What we're doing now is a part of the required consultation for board policy changes. So we will open the floor for discussion, but obviously, as a matter of consultation, if you have follow-up after you marinate in it, I want to be very clear to invite that follow-up at any time. We will be bringing this before the board, probably for formal review at the December meeting. Depending on how today's discussion goes, we want to make sure we don't get ahead of the feedback that we received today, but that's the tentative schedule. And then there will be an entire period in between before it would be brought forward for any sort of formal action. So there's nothing happening today that does not have multiple opportunities and a fairly significant runway for additional conversation. The way in which we're going increases the already tremendous work of the All You Honors Committee, who will play an enhanced role in this updated policy moving forward. The naming policy has an entirely new section on renamings, but also the underlying policy on namings in general is up for its regularly scheduled comprehensive review. So while that was a fair bit more work, it also was a good opportunity to have everything sync together and work together and be updated together well, which I think is to the benefit of the community in terms of clarity and consistency. So I'm going to walk you through an overview of the changes to the policy, and then we'll open the floor for discussion and questions and feedback. So the review, just to clarify, aims to develop and consider a set of amendments to the policy to address how namings happen simply by virtue of its time in the comprehensive review cycle, but with pretty significant change around renamings, which has never been addressed via policy before. So that's entirely new. The review included the scheduled governance that Ned listed, but just for the purposes of keeping the list together, this has included just this fall alone, the All University Honors Committee, the FCC, the Senate Consultative Committee, our work today, obviously, and then all student groups, MSA, COGS, PSG, and then unofficial consultation, but with interested parties like the foundation, the Alumni Association, and several individuals who have expressed great interest or been helpful advisors along the way. As a reminder, or for those of you who are new, this conversation around renamings has emerged in relatively recent years, although related to a history that spans many decades, but emerged in a groundbreaking project called A Campus Divided, which was originally displayed at the Anderson Library in the fall of 2017, and then in fall of 2018 at the Wilson Library. The work represented a fairly robust set of research around the history of the university during a very specific period of time. And that time period included evidence of anti-Semitism and other types of racial discrimination at the university, and inspired an MSA resolution and followed on with a presidential directive calling for an examination of the actions of 4 university administrators who were in leadership positions at the time and who have been previously honored by having buildings in their name, and called the question of whether that honor should continue. A task force was formed called the Task Force on Building Names and Institutional History, a set of incredibly diligent and hardworking volunteers who worked really hard for a very long period of time, but probably would have preferred to have more on the work and the historical context. This work from the task force built upon a previous set of work by a group called the President and Provost Advisory Committee on University History. Both groups had faculty, staff, students, alumni, and community members, and all 5 campuses were represented. The more recent group, the task force, focused specifically on the 4 administrators, and their report opened up a conversation and a discussion over the purpose of namings and how, as we evolve as a society and specifically as a campus community, we should be thinking and then rethinking about how or who we honor with their name on a building. The Board of Regents took up these questions at their April 2019 meeting. They passed a resolution that directed the president to do several things, one of which specifically was to develop this renamings policy that previously did not exist. The renamings policy, just for your information, is the last part of that charge that remains unfulfilled. The other components of the charge have been filled or completed. A timeline of what's gotten us to this point recently. So with my arrival then in July of 2019 and over the 1920 academic year, we did a lot of consultation. Many of you were a very active part of that, and a lot of dialogue to address the board's charge, and looked really closely at what a renamings framework should look like, what the best practices were. As you may recall, this was a national conversation and remains a national conversation. What should our guiding principles be? What are the factors to guide this decision? There were several other universities that had done work in this space. One of those universities' renamings framework sort of emerged as a strong guideline benchmark, and that was from Stanford, which we relied upon heavily with attribution. The draft policy that emerged also relied upon the work of our 2 groups, the task force and the President and Provost Advisory Committee that predated the task force, and merging that language together noted who could make a request, timing, process. And we were pretty far along in the development of that draft policy, had discussed it here with the University Senate, and then George Floyd was murdered. And for a variety of reasons, inspired by the complexity of the feelings many of us were having at that time, we paused and pulled the draft policy from scheduled board action, which was slated at the time for June 2020. So a lot of reflection on a lot of things in that time period, but with regard for the question and conversation before us today, a lot of thought about how we honor historical figures, the way that that system has yielded a set of names that we have honored on our buildings, how that becomes part of our legacy, how perhaps that legacy should evolve as we have evolved and as we will evolve into the future. And really looking at perhaps what other campuses were doing and thinking about how we could be inspired. Some work happening at Princeton in this regard that many of you are familiar with, some happening at my former rival Clemson in South Carolina. And what came out of that reflection is that our work on renamings would actually fall into two categories. So there remains within the new proposed policy the language that was developed prior to George Floyd's death that looks at the process and guidance for when information comes to light that calls to question or calls the question of whether a person who has been honored with a name has facts or attributes that would make us wonder whether that should continue. But we added an additional part to the policy that looks at the idea that we only have a certain number of buildings and that our buildings are our physical embodiment of our legacy. And that up to this point, once a building is named, it had a default assumption of in perpetuity. And that is very limiting, especially for a campus and a campus community like ours that takes very seriously its desire to evolve and to reflect on its history and to look how it can acknowledge its complicated history, but also think into the future. And that with a fixed number of buildings and a continual group of people who achieve and do things that we think are honorable, that we could find a way in which to have that ability to honor people also evolve. And so we crafted policy language that would essentially create a horizon or a sunset, that buildings that are named by virtue of accomplishment or honor would be on a 75-year period during which that honor would exist. And then at the end of the 75-year period, a process would be created where it would become the next person's turn. I've worked very actively with a variety of constituencies, too many to think, but in great depth with the All University Honors Committee to think about the timeline for the horizon, the idea of how we would switch to a new person, how they would be identified, what the process would look like. Some of this will be crafted, assuming the policy passes, by the All University Honors Committee itself, as it does for other ways in which they determine who should be honored. This collective revised policy will go to the University Board of Regents for review on December 17th. I will add, just for your information, that part of the charge from back in April 2019 that I referred to reflected the need for the university to have a broader set of a broadened capacity to address its institutional history. We have hired an additional university archivist, and CLA hired a history faculty member whose expertise is in public history, who will be arriving soon to focus on the scholarly side of advancing this work, to think about deepening our understanding, how this can be part of our scholarship, how this can be part of our teaching. So just some operational things that I know many of you may already be asking. So the 75-year arc means we would be looking at buildings from 1946 and earlier. Some of the 4 buildings are that old, some are not yet. So this is different from looking at what we have sort of colloquially referred to as alleged bad actor. There are two ways that a building might be reviewed to determine whether the name on that building should remain. One would be if the question is called as to whether the person honored deserves that honor. That is one category. That can happen at any time. And the other is just to standardize the idea that the honor lasts for 75 years. And then unless very specific exceptions are met, it is the next cohort of those who have done something worthy of an honors turn to be added to the building. The 75-year line would lead to a review of 18 buildings in Minneapolis, 2 in St. Paul, 3 at the Arboretum, and then 6 in Crookston and Morris. It does not appear that it affects Duluth. So this is 33 buildings. That's an initial review. If this policy is passed, we would be very specific and careful about that. That's a lot of buildings. So it won't happen overnight. This will need to be phased in as processes are developed, as new honorees are identified, as the process for identifying those honorees is created. So there's an assumption that this is not something where you flip a switch, that this will take time to become a part of the fabric of the way in which the All University Honors Committee does their work. So I'll stop there and open the floor, Chris, if you wouldn't mind helping me, for questions, discussion, and feedback.
Yeah, absolutely. The first person on the list is William Jones.
Hi, William.
Hi, Professor Gable. I served on the task force on building names, and I really appreciate that this is happening. I found that process very frustrating, and I'm glad to see this discussion continuing. And I really appreciate the work that went into this policy. I have my son is just walking into the house, and he's probably going to yell. So that's.
He's yelling because he likes the policy too.
Right. No, he's just happy to be finished school. So I have I particularly like really appreciate the sunset policy, and I think it's a really great approach. I think to think sort of setting up the idea that there should be a regular revisiting of names. And I had a few questions about it. So one is there a distinction between honorary building names and other building names? So does this only apply to names who are names that honor individuals? And the reason I ask that is when in the process of researching the building names for the task force, I was struck by the name for Pioneer Hall, which I think was actually, is I think a name that implies a history, a sort of celebration of settler colonialism that I think is part of what the university is really trying to get beyond. And so I wonder if a name like that would be included in the sunset policy, or whether, because it's not an individual. So that's one. I'll just lay out a few. I guess I just have two questions.
Sure.
So that's one question. The other is in the process beyond, I think this is the process outside of the sunset policy. So the process for initiating a review outside of the process, or outside of the sunset process. The policy says that it could either be initiated by the regents or by the president or by an individual. And I just wondered about if my understanding is that the previous question about the 4 buildings was actually initiated by a request from MSA. And I wonder if that's a meaningful distinction between an individual and a group, or and a constituent group that.
Yeah. So, okay, I'll take the second question first, just because it's easier. The policy, anyone could go to the president or to the board and ask them to initiate, which is essentially what happened last time, as I understand it. And correct me if I'm wrong, but that idea would be that the president or the board probably wouldn't necessarily come up with this on their own, that it would be someone seeking for them to initiate the process. So it is the president or the board who formally trigger the review, and that is essentially what happened last time, that MSA wrote a resolution, and in response to the resolution, the president formed and provost formed the task force, as you know. So this is essentially documenting something like that. And MSA could certainly be any group or individual could be the kind of sponsoring entity that would initiate the process. With regard to buildings like Pioneer Hall, I will say, I don't know. You are the first person to ask that question. I would need to really fine tooth comb this, but the way the sunset provision, as I'm thinking of it, is phrased, it's to look at all buildings over a certain age. I can't think of anything in the language that would preclude it, but I don't want to say that for sure, because the language of the policy will start to become very, very important, as you know, and once these questions are ultimately called. And I think this is something that we would want, all university honors to chime in on too, as we get ready to bring this forward. It's an excellent question. And this is why we ask, because as many people as we've talked to, that question had not come up before. Okay, thank you. Chris?
The next person is Abdulaziz Mohammed.
Hi, Bill.
Hello, President Gable. I have two questions too, but I first just want to say thank you for presenting today. Every single time when I hear you give an update on the naming policy, you have talked about how the catalyst for why this is happening is because of the campus divided exhibit and also MSA's advocacy. And I think that that's really powerful, and that acknowledgement is something that I really appreciate. So I just first want to say thank you. I have two questions, and they're similar to Will's. The first is, if a written request were to be submitted, what would the timeline look like in terms of getting a recommendation from the All Honors Committee and the Board of Regents? And the second question is, are there separate processes for removing names, so unnaming, versus renaming buildings, or are they viewed under the same framework?
Yeah, those are great questions. Oh, I'm hearing a weird feedback. I don't know if someone needs to mute. Is anyone else hearing that but me? Okay, so in terms of timelines, so we didn't put anything in the policy that mandates a response by a particular period of time, largely to reflect the fact that there's a certain amount of research required to even initially address. So the timeline is unknown in terms of if it's not done by X time kind of concept, but these things would be on agendas. And so there would be a transparency about the fact that it's being considered, so that so that a stall tactic would be visible, I think is sort of frank way of describing it. So rather than force the research to happen by a certain period of time, which can be very frustrating, Will, excuse me for grabbing your word, we wanted to instead be flexible on time, but make sure there was transparency, so that it would be obvious that this was happening, and then become obvious to the campus community if it wasn't proceeding in a timely way, given the varying degrees of complexity that a request like this may inspire. With regard to removing a name to replace with someone else's versus an unnaming, there is an idea. This would be in two different ways, right? So if there's in the horizon component of the language, 75-year sunset, the idea is that the 75 years is intended to reflect the legacy of a significant accomplishment, the importance of the honor, but that we wouldn't want to necessarily take a name off until we had a name to put on. And this is part of what the All University Honors Committee is working on. And then also to make sure that we contextualize that the building had a name before. And that's actually one of the upsides we think to this work, is that over time we go in and out of buildings that have names on them that we may have no idea who they are and what they did. And this gives us a way to re-honor, re-acknowledge the work that deserved the honor in the first place. That's the sunset provision. On the other side of things, the determination that a name should be removed because there is a concern over whether the honor is deserved. should go a little faster for obvious reasons, I think. And we do want to give the All University Honors Committee time to develop a pool of names. We don't have anything in the policy that would indicate that we would want a building to be unnamed, but we also don't want to rush through the idea of who should be the next person to bear that honor. So there's some transition time in here, but once we develop a pool of names, this should start to go faster. That's sort of how we're anticipating this unfolding. Does that answer your questions?
It does, thank you. And I'm currently driving, so that's why there's like that little bit of background noise. So thank you.
No worries. Thank you.
All right, the next person we have is Murray Frank.
Murray.
Okay, just a clarifying question. I may have missed this, but we're talking about this in terms of honors, but I know a lot of universities sell naming rights to buildings. And I'm just curious if any thought has been given to how this would interact with the ability of the university to raise external funds.
Yes, so the policy applies to honorific namings, not to philanthropic namings or gifts and sponsorships, which are handled contractually. There is a morality clause, just to use the generic term, within our foundation gift agreements already. The idea of the 75-year duration and how that would work, that happens with UMF reviewing their own policies. We have consulted this with them. They are aware of what we're doing. They're interested and now doing their own reflection. But this, they are two different procedures, and so they have two different policies.
Next on the list, I have Ellen Messer-Davidow.
Hi, Ellen.
Thank you. Ellen Messer-Davidow, Department of English. I'm a little bit concerned about what's called the carry forward effect in discrimination, and I'm wondering if that's been thought through. For example, if we look into the more distant past of the university, the pool of likely potential naming candidates will not include very many people of color, Jews, and women because of discrimination during those earlier eras. We have a number of buildings that are named for past presidents, and yet you, President Gable, are our first female president. So if this is thought about generation by generation or era by era, there isn't going to be much diversity in the pool of potential candidates. Related to that, do the candidates have to achieve only within and for the benefit of the university, or can it be in the larger world? Because again, discrimination has created barriers to who can do what in the university and for the university.
So that's an excellent question. And that is exactly what the sunset or horizon provisions were intended to expose and over time resolve, is that for the first nearly 170 years of the institution's life, a very homogenous group of people were in positions to do things that we considered worthy of this type of designation. And we are changing, and so should our landscape over time. And we talked about this with the All University Honors Committee, that in developing their criteria for building out the pool, they should be thinking broadly. Whether we would honor someone who has no university affiliation at all, I mean, the recommendation comes from there's nothing that precludes that. The recommendation would be reviewed like all honors goes through the honors committee, ultimately advisory to the board. That would be unusual, but there's nothing that precludes it.
And I was only thinking of people affiliated in some way with the university, but whose achievements occur out in the larger world, as opposed to within the university community or for the benefit of the university?
There's nothing that precludes that at all. Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Now we have Tony Fussy.
Hi, Tony.
Thank you. So my questions may be kind of the same thing, but asked in a different way. So I apologize if I missed this earlier, but so after the review, like on the Twin Cities campus of those buildings that are over 75 years, and is there a way that a building would retain its name? And if they did, would it be for another 75 years? And the second part of my question would be, would there be any buildings that may retain their name in perpetuity? So say like Falwell Hall, named after the first university president, or possibly Pillsbury Hall, who saved the university back in the day, kind of thing. Would there be any abilities of those to one, a name would be kind of renewed essentially after 75, or one would be kind of untouched and it would be designated, maybe 5 buildings will always have this name listed on them?
That's a really good question also. And that has come up in sort of different versions of that question from a lot of different groups. And it is actually, it's one of the bigger challenges in crafting the policy language, because you don't want the removal of the name at the 75-year mark to feel like a slight, like you were honorable but not honorable enough, is going to feel like you're being dishonored to the heirs or family members or people who are the beneficiaries of the work that was done, or a variety of constituencies could feel that way. And the intention for the sunset side of the renamings policy is for this to not feel like a good or bad, just a passage of time, an evolution. But the board has made clear, and ultimately this is their policy, that there should be some circumstances under which the level of honor was so significant that the building should be in perpetuity, but that should be exceptional. And that's what we're working through with all university honors and with the language before you now. Okay, this next question should be the last question.
And we have Ioana Pripiage.
Yes, hi. I'm CLA Faculty Senate from French and Italian. I just wanted to ask, I mean, I'm not very familiar with the whole discussion. I'm happy that it's happening, the discussion about renaming buildings. But it's still, this question of honors and 75 years just seems very arbitrary to me. One of the questions that was just coming up for me as we were discussing is, there's a lot of messaging and talk about, the memory of the fact that the university is on native land. Has there been an effort to kind of include, the Department of Native American Studies, or just kind of perhaps naming the buildings after territories and cultural symbols that are important to Native American people? That seems like it would be kind of a logical next step as well, rather than this discussion of honor, perhaps.
So we've consulted this policy language with MIAC, which is the Minnesota Indian Affairs Council, the Council of Chairs of the tribes in Minnesota. And there are faculty from the department who are senators and who sit on several of the committees who have been part of the consultation. So the idea that as we develop a pool, that we take into consideration the issues that you raised has been considered and part of the consultation. The 75-year mark, you are correct that we started at 100. Picking the timeline is somewhat arbitrary. The goal was to pick an amount of time that was long enough to reflect that it is quite something to be at a level of achievement that the university community, through the shared governance process, upon advice to the Board of Regents and in public vote, has done something so notable or honorable that your name is carved into the marble. How long should that stay up there for it to recognize that, for it to recognize, for the campus landscape to reflect that honor, for the legacy of, a family's generations to walk through a door that has a similar meaning for that family. How long is that? And yet short enough that the ability to evolve exists in a real and meaningful way, to reflect the changes that we've been talking about during this entire consultation. So the initial draft administrative proposal was 100 years, just to start the conversation. And it was through the feedback and consultation with different communities and constituencies that we landed on 75 years. That's not a magical number. It was just meant to conjure that balance that we've been trying to strike. This is, as far as we know, the first policy of its kind for a university campus. So there's no best practice, there's no, legal, there's nothing to hook into other than taking in the feedback on what length of time for us as a community would feel like it's striking that balance between legacy and evolution. And that's how the 75-year number or length of number of years emerged. Okay, all right then. Thank you all very much for that consultation. As usual, very helpful and insightful. And we'll be working on the language accordingly. So the next item on the agenda is a resolution from the Student Senate on caste-based discrimination. I would like to call on Senator Sarani Milliken to introduce this topic. Sarani?
Thank you. So this is this has been an interesting journey because it has involved conversations with people with a very diverse amount of information about the issue. So I'd like to apologize for a second before if I tell you things that you already know. The caste system is a hereditary social stratification system that was practiced on the Indian subcontinent for over 4,000 years. And because persons are born into the caste, it rigidly limits their social and economic status. It is an issue, and it has been fought in India as a problematic system. And as it happens, caste system has penetrated into the United States, and I'm happy to share a number of examples. But most recently, there's a bunch of suits in California against Cisco alleging caste discrimination. A colleague mentioned to me that they felt they had been discriminated on the basis of caste at this university, but did not know if they were protected. And the answer to that question is they probably are protected and they should have reported, but they don't feel comfortable. So what I'm asking is for the University Senate to support this resolution, which is written in a very skinny fashion. I have put in just the information that's necessary and a single call to action, which is change the Board of Regents policy or recommend to the board that the Board of Regents policy be changed to include caste discrimination explicitly. There are many ways in which this can be done. There are 3 universities in the United States that currently protect against caste-based discrimination. One is the University of California, Davis, which did it quietly without any fanfare, and they just put a parenthetical, including caste, and the appearance of caste after the national origin, and Brandeis University and Colby College, which had statements explaining why they felt that this was the right step to take. It's hard to determine how many people are affected because of the way in which we do our demographics. I, for example, check a box that says Asian when I tell people what my origin is, and that's a larger group than would be affected. I have consulted with a lot of groups. So if you scroll to the bottom of the resolution, it has endorsements from several of the other senates as well. And so I'm happy to take this opportunity to spread a little bit more awareness about this issue in this community, to take some questions if there are any. I remember it's really, I'm in the Twin Cities. This is where George Floyd was murdered. And one of the very common set of statements that not statements, but principles that I believe I've seen emerge over the last 2 years is this disinclination to impose work on people who might be the people who are discriminated against. I happen to come from a privileged community in India, and I see it as my responsibility as a member of the privileged half of India, of Indian origin at least, to try to advocate for this change and take on as much of the burden of education as I can while I'm here. Hopefully I graduate in May. So there's that. Happy to take any questions. Thank you for this opportunity to address this body.
Thank you, Sarani. Are there any questions, feedback, discussion? Yes, David.
Hello, thank you for this policy. There have been so much effort on combating discrimination. I was just wondering about the historical reasons for not mentioning anything about caste, given that this has been known to be an issue for quite some time. And why is it that it's only now being considered to be added? I'm fully in support of your resolution, but it just puzzles me as maybe many others too.
I have a couple of thoughts on that, if I may. So I'm not the expert. I can't give you an answer, but I can give you my best guess. And the best guess is this. The United States contains Indians who came here as immigrants. Most of the people who come here had the resources or found the resources to come here, even if the resource was a shirt on their back and their education. And so what happened was that in the 1950s and 60s, there was a social justice movement in India, which tried to empower the Dalits and the other oppressed castes. At that time, that community did not have the resources to be among the people who are already here. And so I would imagine that this problem is coming up and is becoming louder now, because the people who are able to be here now have, after 40, 50 years of work, developed the resources, built the ability to propel themselves here. So for the first time, you have the conflict of, maybe not for the first time. And it's also the truth that the caste system and caste-based discrimination is probably not an issue in the United States 150 or 200 years ago. This is, on the scale of nations, a new problem. But I think the fact that we are a global world, combined with the dynamics of who is present and who is absent, is what is leading to this being a good time to address this problem before it becomes too large.
Next question.
Next, I have Vivi Ganeshanathan.
Hi, I'd just like to thank the students so much for putting this forward. I really appreciate it. I would like to call a little bit of attention to the fact that this language is a little bit India-centric, and that I'm of Sri Lankan origin. Caste is definitely pervasive throughout the subcontinent, and it's also, just as a point of fact for folks who might not know as much, at least in Sri Lanka, caste also operates outside of Hindu communities. It operates also in Christian and Catholic communities. It also operates in Muslim communities. And sort of the porousness of this discussion, I think I would appreciate maybe a little reframing on, I think it's, so in some of the rhetoric and how we're talking about it, I would appreciate that adjustment. And I think also just sort of in a couple of spots in the resolution itself. But I so appreciate the work that you have put into putting this forward. Thank you.
You're absolutely right. We've lost the word subcontinent on the one whereas clause somewhere in the middle of all the edits. I apologize for that. But you are right that the word Hindu should be removed from there, because there is a reason. It is prevalent everywhere. It is a social system, not merely religious, or not religious. Thank you.
Thank you, Vivi.
Next on the list, I have Scott Petty.
In Sarani's defense, Mattia and I drafted the first version of the text, and the India-centricness is actually our fault and not hers.
I do want to acknowledge Scott and Mattia as first draft, like they are co-authors on this, and they, I will fall on the sword and say that error was mine because I should have got it.
And I'll just take a moment of privilege to say this is why we do consultation and take in feedback. And with previous reference to David's question about what has taken so long for this to happen, or why is it only now that policies like this largely emerge in response to and crafted around the federal law. And this language is not in the federal law. There are analysts that have said that it is presumed within the federal law, and that is, as Sarani sort of referred to earlier, forgive me, Sarani, if I'm paraphrasing incorrectly, possibly true, but that by overtly acknowledging, we make a change that is important for a variety of reasons. And so just to close the loop on that one as well. Any other questions? Okay. Thank you, Sarani, and thank you everyone for your feedback. The next item is an announcement about a resolution from the Academic Freedom and Tenure Committee. Ned, if you'd like to bring this forward, please.
Sure, I just wanted to mention briefly, this is just for information in the University Senate, that we are having a discussion on an academic freedom resolution at the Faculty Senate, and it was thought to be in the Faculty Senate because it's about academic freedom in the classroom when faculty and others are teaching. We did discuss with the other consultative committee leaders, and they were in agreement that that seemed to fit best with the Faculty Senate, but it's still important. We all, at the University as a policy, says we all have academic freedom. So we did want to invite any student or staff senators to join us in that meeting and ask to be recognized if you'd want to make any comments about it. And that's all I have to say about that then.
President Gable, you're muted.
Yeah, sorry. The next item concerns old business. There is no old business. Item 16 concerns new business. Please note that any new business will be referred to committee unless special permission is granted by 2/3 of those voting and present. Is there any new business? Seeing none, I would be happy to entertain a motion to adjourn. Is there a motion? Sarani moves. Is there a second?
Looks like Aaron seconds.
Okay,
Corfield.
thank you. Any discussion? All right, Chris, if you could launch the poll.
Give about 10 more seconds if you wish to vote. And last call. There being 166 ayes, 0 nays, and 1 abstention, that motion prevails.
Okay, so thank you, everyone. We are adjourned. So we'll take a brief break. Faculty senators can stay on this same Zoom link for the Faculty Senate meeting, which will start at 4:05. So we'll take a 5-minute break. Anyone who is not a member of the Faculty Senate may stay in the meeting if desired, but may not vote, and must be yielded time by a faculty senator to speak, but otherwise you are welcome. So I will see everybody back at 4:05. Okay, we'll call this meeting of the Faculty Senate to order. Our first item concerns administrative responses to the Faculty Senate or to Faculty Senate actions and is presented for information. There are none pending. So I'll move to the next item, which is approval of the minutes from the Faculty Senate meeting on November 4th. If we could go ahead and initiate the poll.
We'll give about 10 more seconds if you wish to vote. And last call. There being 101 ayes, 0 nays, and 5 abstentions, that motion does prevail.
Thank you. The next item is the FCC report. I'll call on Professor Patterson, Chair of the Faculty Consultative Committee, to give the report. Ned?
Thanks, President Gable. As with the Senate meeting, the University Senate meeting, there will just be a few short things I'll mention, since much of what we've done in the last month in FCC and leadership relates to agenda items that we already have or have been already indicated in our biweekly updates. But I want to briefly repeat that the FCC has made an initial recommendation that Rochester and then Duluth in pharmacy or medicine be considered to have voting members in the FCC in the future at the time the bylaws are next being updated, which is planned to be relatively soon. So we just want to make sure we're representing the whole system well. And the FCC leadership, and in our FCC meeting today, just prior to the Senate meeting, we are also, which we haven't announced so much, working on finding concrete ways to help further faculty in these challenged times being valued, feeling good about belonging to the U community. I think that's important to all of us as it's such tough times. Early next semester, we're going to probably be doing something related to that. We haven't decided what exactly, and in consultation with FCC and other leaders, and feel free to contact me with any suggestions or ideas how to have concrete ways to help faculty feel more valued and belonging, and or the process and how we can work on this all together. Then lastly, meetings in meetings of the FCC and the leadership, there have been numerous ones regarding non-compliance for the new vaccine requirement, which again, the deadline is tomorrow, as President Gable mentioned, specifically for the process and timing, and then very specifically for the vaccine mandate disciplinary panel, which is an upcoming item. And then all the rest of the work really was our next 3 agenda items. So I will stop there as we are pretty tight in everything today. So back to you, President Gable.
Thanks, Ned. The next item is approval of revisions to the administrative policy on intercollegiate athletic events during study day and finals week. There's no motion or second needed, but is there any discussion? Okay, Chris, if you could initiate the poll, please.
I'll give you about 10 more seconds if you wish to vote. And last call. There being 83 ayes, 1 nay, and 22 abstentions, that motion does prevail.
Thank you. The next item is the Provost proposal on a disciplinary panel for faculty who do not comply with the vaccine mandate. This is a provostial proposal, so this is not on the floor for amendment, but rather for discussion. So I'll call on Provost Croson to introduce the topic.
Thank you, President Gable, and thank you all for your patience with this topic. So as you all probably remember, when the university implemented a process requiring employees to attest to either being vaccinated or testing, we proposed and gained approval from the Faculty Senate for an alternative way of proceeding with discipline for faculty who declined to attest. At that time, we assured the Faculty Senate that we would not use the approved process for anything other than that specific attestation process. So because that process has now changed from an attestation to a mandate, we're again requesting your approval for a similar process. The logic for that request remains the same, and to make sure everyone's informed about exactly what it is we're proposing, I've asked Vice Provost Ropers to join us again to outline that process in this presentation. So with that, I will turn it over to Rebecca.
Great, thank you, Provost Grossen. So as Provost Grossen said, this is a continuation of the conversation that we had at the September 30th Faculty Senate meeting. And we're basically asking for the same approval today that you gave in that previous process. Just to bring us up to date in terms of the context, we've been notified both on November 3rd and November 23rd of the requirement that we submit proof of our vaccination or approved exemptions by tomorrow, December 3rd. As a reminder, this only covers the faculty, the non-unionized faculty, the faculty covered under the Board of Regents policy on faculty tenure. So all of these other groups that are listed there are not implicated by what we're discussing today. As a reminder, we have a governing policy on the faculty tenure policy that governs discipline for all of our faculty covered under that policy. And we have a very strict and very detailed set of steps in that policy about what we need to do when we're covering or when we're considering disciplinary action against faculty. Written into that policy is the option for a body other than the tenured faculty in a person's unit to be considered the consultative body for a dean when that dean is considering discipline. And that's what we're here to ask you again, to approve the designation of that separate body of a small body of faculty outside of that person's unit to consider these cases as they come forward through the university. So this vaccination compliance panel is what we're calling it. We hope to establish this as a separate body to advise the dean on disciplinary action. We are proposing that this be about 5 faculty members with balanced representation. We recognize the need to have different perspectives from tenure stream and contract faculty, since both of those groups of faculty would be covered here, and also from units across the university. Panels would be selected from a list provided by Senate staff of former members of the SJC, former faculty panelists of the Office of Conflict Resolution, and then also contract faculty members with significant governance experience. And the benefits, as Provost Grossen said earlier, are the same as the last time when we came to talk with you about this option, is that we're hoping for consistency across the university. When people have the same behavior, we're hoping for consistent responses from the university. We're also hoping for efficiency. We have a number of academic leaders who are really thinking hard about how they're going to staff people in the spring if they have a faculty or two in their unit who does not comply and they have to consider other options. Faculty in units, we'd prefer that they not have to take on additional work, especially about concerns that relate to their peers' health-related matters. Typical disciplinary matters really are very different. The typical disciplinary matters that would go to a tenured faculty in a person's unit are very different typically than what we're all experiencing now. And then also just important to remember is that faculty governance and faculty voice is continued to be protected within this process as well, because there is a built-in appeals process to the SJC, and we are not in any way proposing that that be eliminated in this process. So this chart, which might seem familiar because it's mostly similar to what we had before when we presented, just shows the various steps of the process that would happen that we're proposing. So a conversation with the dean, which is required by our policy, the dean's report and recommendations, and again, referring and consulting not with the faculty in the person's unit, but with this other committee, what we're calling the COVID-19 Vaccination Compliance Panel instead. the review by this panel to look at perspectives put forward both by the dean and by the faculty member if they so choose. The report from this panel and recommendations or advice to the dean. And then step 5, people can, as I mentioned before, still appeal to the Senate Judicial Committee. So that's the process that we're hoping that you will consider and perhaps approve today. I'll turn it back to you, Provost Carlson.
Great, thank you, Vice Provost Ropers. So that's our proposal on the floor. I'm happy to take questions or entertain discussion or whatever the body would like.
Any questions, feedback for the provost or for Rebecca? Okay, in that case, then Chris, I'd ask you to initiate the poll. Simple majority is needed to approve in this case.
Well, my apologies. Somehow the poll got closed. Let me make sure I reopen that so everyone can. There we go. And we'll give about 10 more seconds if you wish to vote. And last call. There being 105 ayes, 4 nays, and 2 abstentions, that motion does prevail.
Thank you. Okay, the next item is a resolution on academic freedom. I'd like to call on Professor Gopalan Nadathur to present this item. Gopalan?
One second while I get to him. I just gotta...
Okay, can you hear me?
There we go.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so thank you, President Cable, for the opportunity to present this resolution. The resolution that's being considered right now, it actually concerns a spate of legislations that are doing the rounds in various states in the country. These legislations aim to place restrictions on teaching of issues concerning race, gender, and sexuality in public schools, colleges, and universities. A particular target for many of these legislations is a framework for examination of race issues that is referred to as critical race theory. The idea that our university, and in particular the Faculty Senate, adopt such a resolution was mooted by Professor Jennifer Ruth from the Portland State University on behalf of the African American Policy Forum. She approached the chair and co-chair of the FCC, who forwarded the request because it concerned academic freedom issues to the Academic Freedom and Tenure Committee. And we discussed it, we looked at the matter, put together a resolution, discussed it, and that's what you're seeing today. Okay, so the legislations that the resolution is reacting to are deeply troubling for a variety of reasons that are outlined in the joint statement that is linked to from the resolution. To summarize some of the aspects that are especially troubling, okay, the first thing is that they infringe on the rights of faculty to teach and for students to learn in the spirit of free inquiry, an aspect that is the hallmark of the American educational system and of the universities that characterize our country. More specifically, they seek to impose curbs on how the issue of race is discussed, okay, and in particular, how the history of race is discussed, which is quite central to a proper consideration of this issue. Beyond that, they seek to replace instructor and collective faculty judgment on curricular issues by political mandates. Right? Both of these things are really troubling from the perspective of what universities stand for. There's a report by the PEN America that is linked to from the docket that elaborates on these particular perspectives and provides a lot of background information that you hopefully have had a chance to look at. From the perspective of our own university, the legislations are specifically contradictory to many aspects concerning inquiry and education that are enshrined in our mission statement, and also in policy statements that provide support for the notion of academic freedom in our university. In a more contemporary vein, they also go against several positions that the university has taken with regard to education concerning this difficult issue of race in the context of recent significant issues that have occurred over the last year and a half. So the purpose of the resolution itself is twofold. First, it expresses solidarity with educational institutions like ours, as we together countenance the encroachment on academic freedom and the damage that it can do, these legislations can do to the central aims of education. And the second is more specific to our own university. It takes a position with regard to confronting any attempts to impose curbs on how we teach or how we decide what to teach at our university. And it also calls upon the president and the provost to affirm this position as well. Okay, so these are basically what I've just explained right now, the purpose of the resolution. These are reflected in the 4 clauses, the 4 be it resolved clauses in the resolution. So that's about all that I have to say. I should, at this point, turn the mic over so that we can have a discussion as necessary.
Okay, thank you. Any questions, discussion, feedback? Yes, David.
Thank you. Yeah, I applaud the effort that's gone into this, and excuse me, and I'm fully in support of this. But I do have a question about one of the resolution clauses, where it says, "Be it further resolved that the Faculty Senate stands with our K-12 colleagues throughout the country who may be affected by legislation of this ilk." In my view, this is a very weak statement, and I'm wondering, certainly as a university faculty senate, we have no legal authority over anything besides what's going on in the university, but still it seems that this is a very weak statement, and I'm wondering what was considered and how it ended up with this kind of a statement of standing with colleagues.
Gopalan, you're muted.
So as I said at the beginning, the idea that we put together a resolution was suggested to us by Professor Jennifer Ruth, who was a representative of the African American Policy Forum. And when she suggested that we put together a resolution, she provided us with copies of resolutions that have been put forward at other universities, in particular at Portland State University and also at DePaul. And so we took that, and in terms of expressing solidarity, we didn't think too much about changing things that that the other universities were putting together and that was recommended to us, right? And this one clause came from those suggestions. We did tailor it to the specifics as far as it concerned, what we wanted to say about our own university, in particular, the background for the resolution, the whereas clauses, and also specific details about the clauses that apply to our university. So that, in a sense, is an explanation for why we didn't think of making these clauses stronger, because we felt Jennifer would probably know better about what would be important, right? And so we left it at that.
Jerry.
Jerry Cohen, CFANS Senator. First of all, oops, just unmute myself. Okay. I just wanted to address that same thing. I didn't like the word ilk, but other than that, I think it could be a lot stronger than that, because unlike David, I think that we actually have a role in educating the instructors who will occupy positions in the K through 12 teaching realm. And we should actually be educating them to be teachers who can address these issues in the lower grades before they get to the university. So it's not that I first of all, spent 6 years on the academic freedom and tenure, so I just congratulate my colleagues for doing this. So it's not this is not a critique, but I think that could be stronger, because I think we actually have more skin in this game than people want to recognize, because the vast majority of K through 12 educators in the state of Minnesota, I don't know if the vast majority, but certainly a large percentage of them come through the University of Minnesota. That's all I wanted to say.
Thank you, Jerry. Copeland, do you want to reply?
Right. It could be stronger, right? But many things could also be stronger. I would suggest that we just leave it as it is to strike a balance, because there are also positions that we can take that might make a difference, and positions that we might stick our necks out about that may not make much of a difference. Okay.
Thank you. Karen Sue?
Yeah, so just briefly, thank you so much for bringing this forward. I really appreciate the point that Jerry made about, could we make it a stronger commitment to solidarity with K-12 teachers, and that we have a role to play there. I would say that we have this on the table now, and to make changes is, bureaucratically complicated. I think if we want to vote on this today, it probably has to stay the way it is. And in some ways, whatever kind of solidarity statement we're making is likely symbolic. And so I'm comfortable with, I agree that it's a little bit general and we could make it stronger, but I also think there's a value to making this statement the way it is. Just in the interest of making it happen.
Okay, thank you, Karen Sue. Liz?
Hi, yes, I'm Liz Stahl. I'm a faculty, extension faculty senator. And I think this is a really great statement, and I support this. However, I'm just wondering, in the title, again, I work outstate, right in the hot box of a lot of these issues. And honestly, again, this is not my area of expertise. I'm just wondering, we don't even have a definition of what critical race theory is in this statement. And it's such a politically loaded statement. Do we even need that in the title? I mean, because we're teaching about race, gender, and sexuality, correct? Which would be wrapped up into that. So again, I'm just wondering, this wording that has been taken and just has so much political baggage right now, it's such a hot issue, do we even really need that in the title? And again, it's not really explained in there what that necessarily means, but that would be my question.
Thank you, Liz. Copeland?
Yeah, so first I should say something about Karen Sue's observation, and also go back to what Jerry said. It's that we have discussed this resolution, with FCC members. Now also presented it at two other committees, and we had a long discussion at the Academic Freedom and Tenure Committee. And so at some places we have made compromises with regard to the language, right, in recognition of the fact that there might be conflicts. Okay, so I thank Karen Sue for recognizing the fact that there could be issues of this sort, and sort of accepting the decision, our desire to stay with this resolution as is, without having to tinker with that clause. And I apologize to Jerry for not sympathizing or working with him to change the clause. On the issue of the title, I think this is an issue that we discussed fairly extensively in the Academic Freedom and Tenure Committee. I would say that critical race theory is not a term that is that doesn't have a definition. It doesn't have one in the resolution, but it is a notion that is understood. There have been lots of articles written about it, and it's a framework that has been developed over many, many years. Okay, so I don't think there's any ambiguity to it. There is a significant amount of ambiguity that politicians have attached to, have tried to build into it. All this is actually dealt with or discussed in the PEN America report. At the Academic Freedom and Tenure Committee meeting where we discussed this, we felt it was important to be clear that we do want to take a stance about some things. And this particular thing was an important thing that we felt that we needed to take a stance about. And because much of the opposition has been couched as one about against critical race theory, right? And the attempt has been that of trying to redefine it. So it's kind of important to say that we are coming out in support of this term, and in the context of also sort of expressing a sentiment with regard to how race, sexuality, and gender are taught. So it's an issue that we have discussed considerably at the Academic Freedom and Tenure Committee, and we felt it was important to take up this controversy in a sense.
Karen Sue, do you have another question?
Just another comment. I appreciate the point you're making, Liz. That said, I also want to make the point that it goes the other way, that the critical race theory has been taken up in the public realm without understanding what it is, and it's being used to describe any teaching about race in just the most shocking and unnuanced ways, and is having enormous political power out there. School boards are talking about it. And so I think it's really important that we name it, but also that we start to have and so I support the resolution as it is, and I really appreciate the work that the Academic Freedom and Tenure Committee did. And Gopalan, thank you so much for bringing this forward. But I also just want to say that, it would be great if we could have some kind of productive public conversations about this, including, inviting K-12 teachers to some kinds of events and things like that. I mean, I think it is so important that we resist this effort to erase history related to race in public education in this country. And I do think we have a role to play there that's very important.
Okay, thank you, Karen Sue. Phil?
Thank you. Phil Bowman, FCC member and former AF&T chair. I just want to really express my 100% support for the resolution forward brought by Gopalan. I think I understand the suggestions on one side or the other side, maybe some minor changes, maybe strengthen the language, change the title. But I think in the very end, it's really important that we don't have perfection the enemy of the good. And so, again, Gopalan, thank you for bringing us forward, and I'm full support of your proposal.
Thanks, Phil. I'm going to call on Callie Fajardo, whose raise hand feature is not working.
Hi, everyone. I'm Callie Fajardo, professor in American Studies, Asian American Studies, and I'm on the advisory committee for the Institute of Race, Indigeneity, Disability, Gender, and Sexuality. I also approve or wholeheartedly support this document and solidarity statement. I guess in future documents, I think it would be great to have a whereas related to the historic nature of some of the departments that we have in Ridges, including the very historic American Indian Studies Department, which is like the oldest in the country, as well as the African American Studies Department that came out of occupying the buildings, just like that happened at San Francisco State, which created ethnic studies departments and really started this movement, right, for educational and racial justice on college campuses. So I support it. I understand the reasons why we're not going to change it. But if we were to have another document, I would love to underline and underscore some of the historic departments that we have at the U. Thank you.
Thank you, Callie. Gopalan, do you want to respond or just?
Oh, I'm sorry, I'm still unmuted. Yeah, right. Yeah, I'm sorry. Perhaps it's an oversight. We should have discussed it even more broadly than we did. And then we would have known better than not to include mention of these historical departments. I think, though, that from the perspective of the resolution itself, at some point, I mean, it's the 4 clauses that are the really important things, apart from providing a background for it in the context of a university. I feel it might not be so much of a loss if we don't mention it in this resolution, right? But we'll keep it in mind for the future.
Okay. David, did you have another question or a comment?
Yes, maybe a comment, also a question. Question would be, is there going to be follow-up on this? Because that would it seems like many of these comments would be very useful to follow up on, to sort of talk about how we could be educating the educators, to actually have some discussions about critical race theory that involved outstate people, not just sort of talking to the choir, doing some of these activities that really are more than just a symbolic statement that I'm understanding this to be. I will support this, but I really feel that there should be some commitment to following up, because I've heard a number of very good suggestions here that would actually do something more than just be a symbolic stand in favor of academic freedom. Thank you.
Gopalan, I'm not sure if that's for you or for me.
I don't think it's for me, because I mean, while I sort of wholeheartedly support the sentiment, it's not something that one can reflect in a resolution. Right? So
yes.
It's good.
I suppose then it's for me. So the David and others who may share the same question. I mean, our first step is to respond to the resolution, which we will do, assuming it passes when we call for the vote. The broader question around our role in advancing a deepened understanding and acknowledgement of critical race theory is it's not as if it's not happening. And of course, the resolution isn't saying that it's not happening. It's more of a solidarity statement, as we've heard. At least that's how I see it. And please correct me if I'm wrong. And so to understand what we're doing now and where we could improve is really a separate question that we could address. But I want to assure the Faculty Senate that it's not from a standing start. There is work happening individually, departmentally, programmatically, out of OED, and then also regionally, and with some of the national work we do through APLU and AAU. So there's a lot happening that we could document, and other things that we probably could do more of, I think, which is, for better or for worse, always the case to some degree. But but for this resolution, we would respond to the resolution, and then we could think about whether it's a central question or a question that emerges from different departments or different organizations. Yes, Gopalan.
I just wanted to sort of emphasize the fact that the resolution is a way of bringing attention to the need to do such things. Right? It's not just a statement of solidarity. It's also a statement of where we stand, what we will be willing to accept within our university. I mean, to the extent that we can influence these things, getting out that statement ahead of time, right? But then it's also sort of making all of us aware of the issues and hence participating in the overall project of educating the public, making sure that the unhappy circumstances don't come to visit us, and somehow they're also addressed at the country level. Right?
Mm-hmm. Thank you. I mean, just as a follow-up, that we could do an inventory. It would be incomplete because a lot of the work doesn't happen centrally, and in some ways what we want is both, right? Some central attention and then attention from individuals, departments, programs. We have, for example, the new race, power, justice track requirement for undergrads. There's a variety of educational programs that come out of OED. There are different events and initiatives that happen out of individual departments that we may or may not know of because there's no central repository for such things. So I think that we can certainly give some thought in responding to the resolution on how we could have a better collective sense of awareness around what we are doing so that we could identify the best places, the gaps or opportunities where we could do more. I think that's perfectly reasonable and we would be happy to do it. Jerry.
To make it complicated to click the right button. So Jerry Cohen, CFAN Senator. I just wanted to say to Gopalan that I fully support this. I mean, it's a first step, and we have so many things that we can do after it. But if we don't make this first step, they will never occur. And I didn't mean my critique of the teaching side to be a negative on this resolution. It's simply where we can go in the future in that kind of opportunity. And as far as critical race theory in the title, well, a lot of things are mislabeled by current American politicians that have no basis in reality. And critical race theory, with those of us that have actually read books on it, realize that it's actually a relatively scholarly and benign way of looking at American history that explains a lot of the things that we see in modern times. And so I have no problem with it being in the title. It will be misread by all those people who wish to redefine it and to demonize it and to make it something that it's not. But it is perfectly reasonable to have it in the title because then inquisitive minds can actually ask what it is. So I just wanted to bring that up. So I support this, and I think it's well written and it's a first step in the right direction.
Thank you, Jerry. Right, so Gopalan, there's no other hands. Is there anything else you'd like to say before we call for the vote?
No, I think we've covered all the bases, and the resolution has it all. So
Okay.
to the vote.
Okay, thank you. So there's no need for a motion or second. We can initiate the poll.
You have about 10 more seconds if you wish to vote. And last call. There being 99 ayes, 9 nays, and 3 abstentions, that motion does prevail.
Thank you. And thank you, Gopalan, and all of AF&T. All right, the next item concerns old business. There's no old business for the Faculty Senate. Item 9 concerns new business. Please note that any new business will be referred to committee unless special permission is granted by 2/3 of those voting and present. Is there any new business? Okay, seeing none, I would be delighted to receive a motion to adjourn. Is there a motion?
Motion to adjourn.
Thank you. Is there a second? I see seconds.
We have second.
Is there any discussion? Oh, we've called the poll. All right.
You have 10 more seconds if you wish to vote. And last call. There being 108 ayes, 1 nay, no abstentions, that motion prevails.
Okay, thank you, everyone. Enjoy the rest.